Angela was the kind of woman who believed in keeping life simple and steady. She lived in a quiet neighborhood, worked long hours as a professional, and carried herself with grace wherever she went. On this particular evening, she had just finished a full day at the office. It was one of those tiring days where you don't realize how drained you are until you finally step outside and feel the cool air hit your face. She carried her laptop bag over one shoulder and her keys in hand as she walked toward her car in the crowded parking lot. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow across the lot. Cars were lined up neatly, people were coming and going, and there was nothing unusual in the air. Angela took a deep breath, feeling that small sense of relief that comes after completing a demanding day. She always looked forward to the quiet drive home, where she could finally unwind, maybe cook herself something simple for dinner, and enjoy a calm evening. As she reached her car, a shiny black sedan she had worked hard to afford, she unlocked it with a click of her key fob. That's when she noticed a man approaching from the corner of her eye. At first, she thought it was just another person heading toward their vehicle. But as the footsteps grew quicker and closer, she realized this man wasn't simply passing by, he was coming directly toward her. Angela turned and saw a police officer in uniform. His expression was stern, his eyes fixed on her and the car. She froze for a moment, wondering if something had happened nearby, or if he needed help. But before she could even ask, his voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, ma'am. Whose car is this?" Angela blinked, taken aback by the tone. It wasn't a polite question, the kind you'd expect from someone in uniform. It sounded sharp, almost like an accusation. She cleared her throat and answered calmly, "It's my car, officer. I'm just leaving work." The officer's eyebrows furrowed, and instead of nodding or moving along, he stepped closer. "Are you sure about that? This car doesn't look like it belongs to you." Angela felt her stomach tighten. The words stung, not because they made sense, but because of the way they were delivered, cold, dismissive, and filled with assumption. She held up her keys and gave a small smile, trying to ease the tension. "Yes, I'm sure. I've had this car for a while. It's definitely mine." But the officer didn't soften. He circled the car slowly, glancing at the windows, the plates, the tires. It was as if he was searching for something to confirm his suspicion. People in the parking lot began to notice. A few slowed down, curious to see what was happening. Angela's heart began to beat faster, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she could feel eyes on her. The situation was turning into a spectacle, and she hated that. Trying to stay composed, Angela reached into her bag and pulled out her driver's license along with her car registration. She held them out, her hands steady despite the discomfort rising in her chest. "Here are my documents, officer. You can see for yourself." To her surprise, he didn't take them. He waved his hand dismissively, as though her effort didn't matter. "We'll see about that," he muttered, pulling out his radio and calling in the license plate. Angela stood there, her documents still in her hand, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what was happening. She had worked her entire life to be where she was respected in her field, independent, and proud of what she had achieved. And yet, here she was, being doubted for something as simple as standing next to her own car. The officer's voice was firm as he spoke into the radio, giving her license plate number. She could hear the static reply from the dispatcher, but she couldn't make out the words. She swallowed hard, trying not to let her frustration show. Around her, more people were gathering, their curious stares piercing into her. She could almost hear their thoughts. What had she done? Why was an officer questioning her? Angela forced herself to breathe slowly. She knew this wasn't the moment to lose her composure. Still, she couldn't ignore the rising wave of embarrassment. She had never liked unnecessary attention, and now she was the center of it. Strangers whispered to one another, watching as the officer scrutinized her car, ignoring the fact that she stood right there with clear proof of ownership in her hand. Inside, she felt a storm brewing. She wasn't angry in the loud, shouting way. It was a quieter kind of anger, the kind that builds up when you know you're being treated unfairly, when you know you deserve respect but aren't receiving it. She straightened her shoulders, reminding herself that she was not powerless in this situation. The officer turned back to her, his eyes narrowing. "Why don't you tell me again, where did you get this car?" Angela pressed her lips together, stunned by the question. He wasn't even pretending to be professional anymore. She gave a slow, steady answer, "I bought this car, officer. It's registered in my name. If you'll check the documents, you'll see everything is in order." He tilted his head, almost as if he was daring her to say more. The parking lot had gone unusually quiet now, the hum of the evening replaced by the silence of onlookers. Angela felt her pulse in her ears, the weight of every eye on her. She wondered if anyone could see the truth in her calmness, the dignity she was trying so hard to maintain. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about her sense of worth, her right to stand there without being treated like she was less. And in that moment, Angela understood that this wasn't simply a misunderstanding. It was something deeper, a test of her patience, her strength, and perhaps, her ability to stand tall when the world expected her to shrink. As she looked at the officer, still circling her car as though she were a stranger trespassing, Angela knew one thing for certain: this evening, which began like any other, was about to change her life in ways she never imagined. Angela stood still, her ID and car registration still in her hand, feeling as if time had slowed down. The officer's voice through his radio echoed faintly in the parking lot. The people passing by didn't even try to hide their curiosity anymore. Some paused with shopping bags in hand, others leaned on their carts, whispering quietly but never looking away. Angela could feel the weight of their eyes on her, and each stare made her heart sink a little lower. The officer walked slowly around her car once again, as though he was an investigator in some crime drama. His shoes clicked against the pavement, and every step seemed exaggerated, dragging out the moment. Angela's patience was thinning, but she tried to stay calm. She told herself over and over, "Stay steady, don't let him see you rattled." She gently lowered her ID and documents back into her bag, not because she was giving up, but because she realized he wasn't interested in the truth, at least not yet. She folded her arms, not in defiance, but in quiet strength. If he wasn't going to respect her proof, she would not stand there holding papers that meant nothing to him. The officer turned toward her again, narrowing his eyes. "So, you say this is your car? You expect me to believe that?" His voice carried not just doubt, but also something colder, an assumption that no matter what she said, she couldn't be right. Angela met his stare without flinching. "Yes. You don't have to believe me, officer. The documents already prove it." Her words were calm, but the firmness in her tone was impossible to miss. The small group of onlookers grew larger. A couple near the front had their phones raised, quietly recording. Angela noticed it out of the corner of her eye, and for a split second, she felt a surge of relief. At least someone would see what was happening. At least she wouldn't be invisible in this moment. The officer, however, seemed to grow uneasy with the attention. His voice became louder, as though trying to assert control over the situation. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle." Angela hesitated. Her instincts told her to comply for her own safety, but her pride told her she had done nothing wrong to warrant such treatment. Still, she took a step back, her heels clicking against the concrete. She raised her hand slightly to show she was cooperating. "Better," the officer muttered, almost to himself, as he walked up to the driver's side door. He peered through the window, as though expecting to find something suspicious. Angela wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. What did he think he would see? A bag of groceries? Her work files? It was as though he was determined to find guilt where none existed. The silence stretched. Angela's thoughts drifted to her long day at work, the cases she had handled, the meetings she had led, the young associates who looked up to her for guidance. She thought about how her colleagues saw her competent, professional, someone who handled situations with clarity and strength. And now, here she was, standing in a parking lot, being treated as though she didn't belong next to her own car. The contrast stung deeply. The dispatcher's voice came faintly through the officer's radio, confirming the car's registration details. Angela could hear enough to know that her name had been verified. Relief washed over her for a brief moment. Surely this would end now. But the officer didn't move away from the car. He didn't apologize, or even acknowledge what had just been confirmed. Instead, he asked, "Where were you before you came here?" Angela blinked, confused by the question. "I was at work. I just finished for the day." "And where do you work?" he pressed. The question wasn't about facts anymore, it was about doubt, about making her justify her very existence. Angela felt her jaw tighten. She didn't owe him an explanation, not when her documents had already proven everything he needed. But she also knew that answering calmly was the only way to preserve her composure. "I'm an attorney," she replied simply, her voice steady. The officer's expression flickered for a brief moment. It was so subtle that most people wouldn't notice it, but Angela did. She saw a flash of surprise, quickly masked by his practiced sternness. Still, he said nothing in response. Angela could sense her patience slipping like sand through her fingers. The embarrassment of being questioned in front of strangers weighed heavily on her chest. She glanced around and saw sympathetic faces in the crowd, people who seemed to silently root for her, though none dared to step forward. Their presence comforted her slightly, but it also reminded her that she was performing on an unwanted stage. The minutes dragged on. The officer continued pacing, asking the same questions in different ways, as though repeating them would suddenly reveal a different truth. Angela kept answering with the same calm tone, refusing to let her frustration turn into anger. Each answer was like a quiet act of resistance, a reminder to herself that she still held control over her own voice. As the crowd thickened, whispers grew louder. "She showed him her papers, what more does he want?" one woman murmured. Another voice chimed in, "He's dragging this out for no reason." Angela heard these comments, and though she didn't turn to acknowledge them, she felt a quiet gratitude. At least some people could see the unfairness of what was happening. The officer leaned against the hood of the car, scribbling something into a notepad. He didn't explain what he was writing, and Angela didn't ask. She knew the situation was spiraling into something much bigger than it needed to be. What had started as a simple walk to her car had become a test of endurance, a public display of authority against reason. Her phone buzzed in her bag, likely messages from friends or colleagues checking in. But she didn't dare reach for it. She didn't want the officer to mistake her movement for anything suspicious. Every small action felt loaded now, as though even adjusting her stance could be misinterpreted. She lifted her chin slightly, grounding herself with a silent promise, "You are stronger than this moment. Don't let it break you." And so she stood, silent but unshaken, as the tension thickened around her. The crowd waited, the officer pressed, and Angela's quiet determination grew stronger with every passing second. She didn't know exactly how the scene would end, but she knew one thing for certain: she would not let this moment define her. And though she didn't realize it yet, what was about to unfold would not only change her life, but also the life of the very officer who doubted her. Angela stood firm, her breath steady though her heart was racing. The officer continued his questions, circling back to the same doubts again and again, as though repetition could somehow undo the truth. She answered with calmness each time, her words clipped but respectful. She knew she had nothing to hide, yet she also knew that the eyes on her made the moment feel much heavier than it should. The crowd around her had grown larger, their murmurs louder. Several phones were now raised, recording every second. Angela noticed the glow of screens pointed at her and at the officer, and she knew this meant the situation was no longer private. In the back of her mind, she thought, good. Let the world see. Still, she held her composure, not giving the officer anything to twist against her. As he leaned against the car, flipping through his notes, Angela decided she would not remain in the shadow of his doubt any longer. She reached into her purse carefully, slowly, making sure her movement was clear and deliberate. The officer's eyes darted to her hand immediately. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" His tone carried a sharp edge. Angela lifted her hand calmly, revealing a small, official-looking card. Her voice was measured, firm, and steady. "I'm simply showing you something important." She stepped closer, extending the card so that everyone, especially the officer, could see it. The crowd leaned forward, curious. The officer squinted at the card, then at her. "My name," Angela said clearly, her voice ringing with confidence, "is Angela Williams. I am a licensed attorney with the State Bar Association." The silence that followed was almost theatrical. The officer blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected that. His lips parted as if he wanted to respond quickly, but no words came out. His eyes flicked down to the card, then back to Angela's steady gaze. The crowd erupted in murmurs. "She's a lawyer," someone whispered. Another person said louder, "That's Angela Williams. I've seen her on the news. She fights these kinds of cases." Angela let the moment sink in. She didn't need to raise her voice. The weight of her identity was enough. She held the officer's gaze without wavering, her posture tall, her presence unshakable. For the first time since the confrontation began, she saw doubt in his eyes, not doubt in her, but doubt in himself. He knew her name now. He knew exactly what it meant. She wasn't just another woman in a parking lot. She was someone who knew the law inside and out, someone who had built a reputation for standing up against unfair treatment. The officer shifted uncomfortably, his confidence cracking. His hand, which had been steady while writing in his notepad, now fumbled slightly. He cleared his throat. "That doesn't change the situation, ma'am." "I still have to," Angela interrupted gently, not with anger but with undeniable authority. "What it changes, officer, is everything. Because I know my rights. And I know exactly what you've done here tonight." The crowd reacted audibly this time, a wave of gasps and quiet cheers. People raised their phones higher, capturing every word. The officer glanced around nervously, realizing that the balance of power had shifted in an instant. Angela wasn't done. She stepped closer, not in aggression, but in quiet strength. "You had proof of my ownership the moment the dispatcher confirmed my registration. Yet you continued to question me, to circle me, to treat me as though I didn't belong. And now," she said, her voice carrying across the lot, "you are being held accountable not just by me, but by every person standing here." The tension in the air was electric. The officer's face flushed, his stern mask slipping. He looked around at the phones, the witnesses, the growing attention. For the first time, he seemed to realize that his career wasn't untouchable. Angela's words were steady, deliberate. "I don't need to raise my voice. I don't need to argue. The facts are here, the people are watching, and your own choices are on full display. Whatever happens next is not on me, it's on you." The crowd broke into soft applause. Some nodded in agreement, others whispered encouragement toward Angela. The officer's hands twitched at his sides, torn between retreat and resistance. But the truth was clear, the moment was no longer his to control. Angela could feel her confidence growing with every passing second. She wasn't simply defending herself anymore, she was standing for something larger. Every lawyer she had ever admired, every client she had ever represented, Every young woman who might face doubt in the future, they were all with her in spirit. The officer opened his mouth as if to regain authority, but the words died in his throat when he noticed a young man from the crowd step forward slightly. The man raised his phone high and said clearly, "I'm live streaming this. Thousands are watching right now." Angela didn't need to say anything else. She had already won the moment. She simply folded her arms, a quiet smile touching her lips, as she looked the officer in the eye. The power dynamic had completely flipped. He was the one on the defensive now, scrambling to figure out how to proceed while the world was watching. In that instant, Angela realized something profound. She had come to the parking lot just to go home, expecting an ordinary evening. Instead, she had been pushed into a situation that tested her patience, her dignity, and her courage. But because of who she was, because of the years she had spent building her voice, she had turned the tables in a matter of seconds. The officer looked down at his notepad, then at the cameras, then back at Angela. His authority had crumbled, and his career, though he didn't yet know it fully, had just been placed on the line by his own actions. Angela stood silently, letting the moment breathe. She didn't need to press further. The truth had spoken for itself. What had started as humiliation had now turned into revelation. And though the officer still stood in front of her, trying to hold on to the last threads of control, Angela knew that his role in her story was nearly over. Because from this point on, the world would carry her truth forward. Angela watched the officer for a few more seconds, letting the weight of the moment settle. She didn't rush, she knew that patience was her ally. Every eye around them was fixed on the unfolding scene, every phone capturing the encounter, and every word she had spoken replaying in the minds of the witnesses. She could feel the subtle shift. The officer's posture had changed, his confidence eroding with each passing moment. Suddenly, a uniformed supervisor arrived, hurrying from the station nearby. His presence brought an immediate ripple of attention from the crowd. He looked at the scene with concern, eyes moving between Angela and his subordinate. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. Angela knew this was the moment where things would start moving faster, where the consequences of the officer's actions would begin to take shape. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, cleared his throat. "Officer," he said, "what seems to be the issue here?" His voice carried authority, and Angela could tell that he wasn't there to side with anyone, he wanted facts. The officer fumbled. His notes, which had been his anchor, now seemed meaningless. He opened his mouth to explain, but Angela stepped forward, calm yet firm. "Sir," she said, holding her card out again, "I am the owner of this vehicle, fully registered, and legally parked. The officer accused me of theft without cause, and his actions have been witnessed by multiple people and recorded on video." The supervisor's eyes widened slightly as he took in the words. He glanced at the crowd, noting the phones pointed directly at the officer, and then back at Angela. The weight of what she had said began to sink in. She was composed, logical, and undeniable. She was no longer just defending herself, she was holding someone accountable. "I need to see the video evidence," the supervisor said after a pause, his tone measured but firm. "Please show me your phone." Angela didn't hesitate. She took out her phone and quickly pulled up the recording. Within seconds, the footage showed the officer approaching her, his tone suspicious and his questions unwarranted. The recording captured every detail, his body language, the repeated accusations, and Angela's calm and patient responses. The supervisor's eyes followed the video closely. He frowned as he watched the officer lean over, muttering under his breath, clearly unsure about the situation. Then came the moment when Angela revealed her credentials, the attorney card, and the officer's hesitation became evident. The video made it impossible to deny what had occurred. "This is serious," the supervisor said quietly. He looked at the officer, who had gone pale, avoiding eye contact. "Do you have an explanation for this behavior?" The officer stammered, his voice wavering. I thought. I was just following protocol. I wasn't. I didn't mean, his words were disjointed, meaningless in the face of the evidence before them. Angela shook her head slightly, her expression firm. Following protocol doesn't include harassment or baseless accusations. You approached me without verification, questioned my integrity, and caused a public scene that could have been avoided. This is not a matter of personal opinion, it's a matter of documented fact. The supervisor nodded slowly, processing the situation. He turned to the officer again. I need you to step aside. We will review this thoroughly. For now, you will not take any further action regarding this individual or vehicle. The officer's face fell. He knew that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. He had underestimated the power of truth and presence. What started as a routine accusation had turned into an examination of his judgment, professionalism, and ultimately, his career. Angela kept her composure, but inside she felt a mix of relief and vindication. She had stood her ground, and now the system itself was responding. People in the crowd whispered among themselves, some clapping softly, others nodding in admiration. Their support was quiet but palpable. The supervisor continued, speaking directly to Angela now. Thank you for remaining calm and for providing clear evidence. This helps us address the matter properly. We will conduct a full review, and you may be contacted for further information if needed. Angela nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction. I appreciate that. I only want the truth to be recognized and for this kind of behavior to be corrected, so others are not treated unfairly in the future. As she spoke, the officer finally spoke up again, his voice quieter, less assured. I didn't intend to. The supervisor cut him off, his tone firm. No further explanations are needed at this moment. We will handle the matter administratively. Angela realized that her words and actions had set the course for real consequences. The officer's career, built over years of authority and routine, was now under scrutiny because he had acted impulsively and unfairly. The supervisor's intervention meant that accountability was moving into motion. The crowd began to disperse slowly, but several people lingered, offering words of encouragement to Angela. You handled that beautifully, one woman said. I can't believe he thought he could intimidate you. Angela smiled gently. Thank you. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to stand firm. Sometimes, staying calm and showing proof is more powerful than arguing. As the supervisor and the officer began walking toward their vehicle to continue the review process, Angela felt a shift within herself. The experience had been stressful, frightening even, but it had also revealed her own strength. She realized that being prepared, knowing her rights, and speaking with confidence could change the course of events in ways she hadn't imagined. She also thought about the broader impact. The recording of the incident would spread, showing others that confronting unfair treatment with calmness and clarity could lead to justice. People witnessing her courage, even from their phones, could be inspired to stand up for themselves in similar situations. The officer walked slowly, head down, and Angela felt a sense of closure. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about truth and fairness. She had not let anger dictate her actions. Instead, she had relied on evidence, presence, and dignity to navigate the situation. Walking back to her car, Angela reflected on the events of the evening. What had begun as a routine parking situation had escalated into a confrontation that tested her patience, her courage, and her ability to maintain control under pressure. And yet, she had come through stronger, more confident, and aware of the impact one individual could make when armed with truth and calm determination. Angela started her engine, the sound breaking the quiet of the lot. As she drove away, she felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. She knew the officer's actions would not go unnoticed and that a review would likely result in consequences for his behavior. But more importantly, she knew she had taken a stand not just for herself, but for every person who might one day face a similar situation. The night air was cool, and the streets were quiet. Angela reflected on the power of preparation and self-assurance. She thought about how quickly situations could escalate when people act on assumptions and biases, and how important it was to respond thoughtfully, without fear. She also considered the unseen effects, how her actions could ripple through the community, inspiring others to act with integrity, courage, and clarity. Standing up to unfairness, she realized, wasn't just about winning a single confrontation. It was about setting a standard, showing that truth and fairness could prevail, and that even in moments of intimidation, one person's voice could make a difference. As she turned into her neighborhood, Angela felt a calm satisfaction. The immediate tension of the encounter had passed, but the impact would continue. She knew that reporting the incident officially and cooperating with the review process was the next step. But she also understood that what mattered most had already happened. She had stood her ground, she had remained composed, and she had ensured that fairness had a chance to triumph over prejudice. Angela parked her car, stepping out slowly. The night felt quieter now, almost reflective. She took a deep breath, appreciating the stillness, and thought about the lessons learned from the encounter. Courage, patience, preparation, and calmness were powerful tools. She had wielded them well. As she walked toward her home, she knew that this incident would stay with her, but not as a memory of fear or frustration. Instead, it would be a reminder of strength, the importance of standing firm, and the impact one individual could have when acting with integrity. Angela smiled softly to herself. The night had tested her in ways she hadn't expected, but she had proven to herself and to everyone watching that dignity, truth, and composure could shift even the most difficult situations. She felt proud, not because she had confronted the officer, but because she had remained herself, honest and unwavering, throughout the entire encounter. And in that moment, Angela realized that her actions had done more than protect her. They had set a precedent. They had reminded everyone watching that accountability matters, that bias can be challenged, and that fairness, when pursued with clarity and courage, always finds a way to prevail. Angela woke up the next morning feeling a sense of calm determination. The events of the previous evening were still fresh in her mind, but she refused to let them linger as stress. Instead, she focused on what could be done next. She knew that the officer's behavior had been wrong, and that the review process would be the key to ensuring that justice was served. But more than that, she felt a personal responsibility to see this through, not for revenge, but for fairness and accountability. Her first step was to contact the police department's internal affairs division. She calmly explained the situation, summarizing the encounter with clarity and precision. She detailed the officer's unfounded accusations, his confrontational attitude, and how she had responded with calm and evidence. She provided her video recording as proof, knowing it would serve as the strongest testimony of what had occurred. The internal affairs officer she spoke with listened carefully, asking questions to clarify details. Angela answered each question honestly and without emotion, letting the facts speak for themselves. She noticed that the officer on the other end of the line occasionally paused, clearly impressed by her composure and thoroughness. "Thank you for providing this information," the internal affairs officer said. "We will review the video and conduct interviews. Your cooperation is invaluable. Cases like these are taken very seriously." Angela felt a small sense of relief, but she also knew that the process could take time. She had to remain patient, allowing the system to work as it was intended. While waiting, she reflected on the ripple effect of what had happened. Her actions had already inspired the people who had witnessed the incident. Videos of the encounter were being shared online, showing others how to stand up for themselves respectfully and effectively. She realized that this moment could do more than just correct a single wrong, it could become a lesson in courage for many. By mid-morning, she received an email from the police department confirming that her complaint had been received and was under active review. They scheduled a formal interview for later that week. Angela prepared meticulously, organizing her notes, video evidence, and any witnesses' contact information. She wanted to present a clear, concise account that would leave no room for doubt. On the day of the interview, Angela arrived at the police station with quiet confidence. The room was small but official, with a table separating her from the panel of investigators. She was calm, composed, and ready to speak. The interview began with standard questions about her identity and background, but soon shifted to the events of the night in the parking lot. Angela recounted the encounter, step by step, emphasizing the officer's unwarranted behavior and her measured response. She showed the video on her phone, highlighting the critical moments when the officer's tone was aggressive, his accusations unfounded, and her calm presentation undeniable. The investigators watched closely, taking notes, and asking follow-up questions to ensure they understood every detail. As the interview concluded, Angela could sense that the investigators were impressed. Her calmness, clarity, and evidence made it clear that the officer had acted inappropriately. One of the investigators, a woman with a kind yet professional demeanor, nodded thoughtfully. "This is a strong case," she said. "The evidence is clear, and your account is consistent. We will proceed with an internal review and determine appropriate action. Thank you for your professionalism." Angela left the station feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. She knew the next step was out of her hands, but she also understood that she had done everything possible to ensure that justice could be served. Her actions had not only protected her own rights, but had also created accountability for someone in a position of authority. Over the next few days, Angela continued her routine, though she remained aware that the outcome of the review was imminent. Then, a notification arrived from the police department. The internal review had concluded, and the findings were significant. The officer had been found in violation of departmental policies, and his behavior was deemed unacceptable. The consequences included immediate suspension pending further disciplinary action, a formal reprimand, and mandatory retraining focused on professional conduct and bias awareness. Angela read the notification carefully, a sense of vindication washing over her. This wasn't about personal victory, it was about setting a precedent, ensuring that no one could abuse their authority without accountability. She realized that her calm and deliberate actions had directly led to this outcome. The news quickly spread online, with many people sharing the story of Angela standing up to the officer and holding him accountable. Social media posts praised her courage, her patience, and her ability to navigate a difficult situation without anger. She received messages from strangers thanking her for showing how fairness and composure could overcome bias and intimidation. Angela felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her actions had inspired others to act with integrity and strength. The officer, meanwhile, faced intense scrutiny within the department. Colleagues and supervisors reviewed his past conduct, and it became clear that this incident was not an isolated one. The suspension was extended, and he was eventually removed from active duty. The consequences were significant, reflecting the seriousness of his actions and the department's commitment to accountability. Angela followed the developments quietly, avoiding any desire for public confrontation. She knew that the most important aspect was the system responding appropriately, not her personal satisfaction. Yet, she couldn't help but feel proud that her actions had initiated real change, impacting both the officer's career and the broader community. In the weeks that followed, Angela reflected on the lessons she had learned. She understood the importance of remaining calm in stressful situations, of documenting interactions, and of knowing one's rights. She realized that courage wasn't about confrontation, it was about clarity, patience, and the willingness to stand firm in the face of unfairness. Angela also thought about the broader impact of her actions. The story had reached many people, reminding them that individuals could hold authority figures accountable, that bias and misconduct could be challenged, and that fairness and truth had power when presented with confidence. She felt a responsibility to continue advocating for integrity, knowing that one person's actions could inspire many others. One evening, As she sat quietly in her living room, Angela reflected on the journey. What had started as a simple parking situation had escalated into a confrontation, a public display of courage, and ultimately, accountability. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and potential injustice, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and aware of her own power to influence change. Her friends and family reached out to congratulate her, praising her composure and bravery. Angela smiled, feeling gratitude for their support, but also knowing that the real accomplishment lay in the lesson she had embodied: fairness, patience, and truth could overcome intimidation and bias. She continued to monitor the news and online discussions, seeing how the story of the officers' misconduct and the resulting disciplinary action inspired conversation about accountability and professionalism. Angela realized that her decision to act calmly and decisively had created a ripple effect, influencing not just one individual, but a community's awareness of justice and responsibility. As weeks turned into months, Angela returned to her normal routine, but the experience remained with her. She had learned the value of preparation, the power of evidence, and the importance of standing firm without anger. The officer's career had ended, but her impact continued, reminding people everywhere that fairness and courage could triumph over unfairness and bias. Angela often reflected on the moment when she chose calm over confrontation, evidence over emotion, and action over fear. She understood that this was the true victory, the ability to maintain integrity while ensuring accountability. Her life continued, but the lessons from that night would stay with her forever. Through this experience, Angela had not only protected herself, but had also made a difference. She had shown that one person, armed with truth, patience, and courage, could stand against injustice and emerge victorious. And in doing so, she had inspired others to believe in the power of fairness, the importance of accountability, and the strength that comes from staying composed, no matter the challenge. Her story became a quiet legend in her community, a reminder that standing up for oneself with dignity and evidence could create meaningful change. Angela knew that while the road had been difficult, the outcome was worth every moment of effort. She had faced intimidation, navigated fear, and ultimately changed the course of events not through anger, but through clarity, patience, and unwavering integrity. And as Angela continued her life, she carried this lesson with her always: that courage is not loud or aggressive, it is calm, steadfast, and committed to truth. And sometimes, that is all it takes to change the world.